Not all who feel misplaced are lost. Some are simply remembering too early. Inspired by Edgar Cayce. In the forgotten hush of 1895, on a quiet Virginia beach, a boy no older than 18 whispered something into time. His voice, though young, trembled with a weight that belonged to centuries. "The souls are preparing," he said. "They await the great return." Few heard him. Fewer still understood. That boy was Edgar Cayce. And that moment, buried beneath waves of history, overshadowed by louder prophecies, was the birth of a map we weren't ready to read. A prophecy not of fire and brimstone, but of return. Not the return of a savior or a sign in the sky, but the return of us. The return of ancient souls. He spoke of rememberers' souls who have walked this earth through every great rise and every devastating fall, who once carried the light of Atlantis, the compassion of Lemuria, and the secrets older than any scripture. And now they return. Through you, through me, through those whose eyes ache with homesickness they cannot name. But their return was never meant to be obvious. They will walk among you, Cayce warned, appearing ordinary, yet carrying extraordinary gifts. That was the test. Not the awakening, but the remembering. Because this time the world would not recognize them. It would tell them they were broken, delusional, depressed. It would pathologize their visions, erase their knowing, and still they would return. Why now? Because the veil is thinning. Because the old systems are cracking. Because humanity, standing at the edge of its own forgetting, has begun to hear the call again. The prophecy Cayce delivered that day was unlike any other. Not a prediction of doom, but a timetable of transformation. He described 7 waves of returning souls, each wave encoded with memory, with purpose, with the medicine the earth would need to survive its next becoming. And it began not with thunder, but with artists, dreamers, psychologists, storytellers. Those who shaped the invisible fabric of thought and reminded us that healing was possible. We are now in the middle waves, the healers, the environmental empaths, the bridge builders. The ones who wake in the night with a sense of urgency they cannot explain. Who look at the stars not for science, but for home. But here's the truth most have missed. These souls did not return out of karma. They returned out of choice. This was not a punishment, it was a vow. A vow to remember in a time of forgetting. To bring harmony where there is division. To carry light where the world insists on darkness. They come not to lead, but to awaken. Not to teach, but to remind. And if you've ever felt like your soul arrived too soon, this message was always meant for you. You didn't hear this by accident. If your soul is stirring awake inside the collective dream, then let the act of subscribing to Edgar Cayce predictions be sacred, a silent vow that you are ready to remember. You were told you were anxious, told you were too sensitive, too strange, too serious. You were told to smile more, to stop asking such deep questions, to grow out of it. But how could you, when your dreams were laced with places you'd never visited yet felt like home? When certain songs, certain faces, certain ruins on a television screen made your chest ache with grief you couldn't place? How do you explain that kind of homesickness to a world that doesn't even believe you left? You felt it your whole life, the dissonance, the quiet fracture between who you are and who you're supposed to be. You've walked through childhood like a visitor at a masquerade ball, pretending to understand the rules, smiling through the emptiness, wondering why everyone else seemed content with things that felt hollow. And maybe no one told you this, so let me say it clearly now. That dissonance was never dysfunctional. It was the echo of your soul remembering. Edgar Cayce called them the returning ones, the souls who would come back not because they had to, but because they chose to. But what he couldn't fully describe in that trance upon the sands of 1895 was the pain that would come with that choice. The emotional cost of remembering in a world built on forgetting. Because it's one thing to awaken in the comfort of a monastery or a temple, but to awaken in suburbia, in a 9-to-5 routine, in the sterile corridors of a modern hospital being told your grief is a chemical imbalance. That's something else entirely. This is the soul pain no one prepared you for. It begins quietly, a restlessness in the bones, a knowing that something's missing even when everything looks fine. You can have the job, the family, the safety, and still feel like you're dying inside. Because what's dying is the lie, and in its place the truth stirs. You start to feel things more deeply, the suffering of others, the dissonance in conversation, the shallow chase of consumer life. Things you once tolerated now feel unbearable. People you love no longer recognize you, or worse, they do and they resent it. You begin to isolate, thinking you're broken. Depression knocks, anxiety swells. Panic flares not because you're weak, but because your inner compass is spinning wildly, trying to realign with something real, something ancient. And all the while, the world offers you medications, distractions, diagnoses. It tells you you're too much, that you're the problem. But here's the truth. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. You are not malfunctioning. You are metamorphosing. This pain, this ache that presses against your ribcage at 3 a.m., is not madness, it's memory. The memory of who you were, of why you came, of the ancient promise you made long before this life began. Because for many returning souls, the forgetting is brutal. Like smoke rising from a book long burned, the memories don't return as words, they return as sensation, as ache, as recognition without origin. We chose this veil, this amnesia, so we could walk among the slumbering and not disturb their dreams too soon. We agreed to enter quietly, to awaken slowly. But some of us are remembering too early, and it hurts. There's no guidebook for how to be ancient in a world obsessed with novelty. No roadmap for carrying Atlantean grief in an era that mocks spiritual sensitivity. And yet you persist. You cry in parking lots. You shake during eclipses. You find your breath stolen by art that others pass by. You feel other people's emotions like tidal waves. You wonder if you're crazy. You wonder if you're cursed. You're not. You're simply attuned. You're tuned to the sorrow of the earth, to the frequency of souls, to the memory of lifetimes woven into the stars. And that's why this hurts. Because you remember love before it was conditional. You remember truth before it was marketed. You remember silence before it was invaded. So when the noise of this modern life deafens you, it's not weakness, it's resonance. Your nervous system is translating a mismatch between the sacred and the synthetic. And yet even in this confusion you endure. You listen for signs. You hold space for strangers. You offer light in shadows others refuse to name. And perhaps you've even started to wonder if you're alone in this. You're not. There are others waking in similar disarray. Others walking the tightrope between inner knowing and outer conformity. Others who carry dreams that feel more like messages than sleep. Some of them are children born with ancient eyes and vocabularies that startle their parents. Others are elders who've hidden their knowing for decades, waiting for the world to be ready. And many are in between, like you, suspended between forgetting and full remembrance, aching for a context that doesn't exist in mainstream language. And that's where Edgar Cayce's forgotten prophecy becomes more than history, it becomes lifeline. Because he didn't just describe a return of souls, he described their inner terrain. He named the test, the forgetting, the false diagnoses, the spiritual amnesia. He saw this exact moment, a generation of souls waking into confusion, wondering why they didn't feel like they belonged, while quietly carrying the medicine the world most desperately needs. So if you're tired, not just physically, but existentially, it's not failure. It's fatigue from lifetimes of service. If you feel like you've lived too many lives in one, you probably have. And if the world seems too loud, too fast, too shallow, it's because your soul was shaped in deeper waters. Let this be your confirmation. You are not broken. You are bridging. You are not lost. You are arriving. And your pain, as unbearable as it may feel, is not an ending. It's a doorway, a sacred contraction before cosmic birth. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what happens when who you truly are doesn't fit into this world? What if your deepest self isn't a product of this lifetime, but a soul echo that spans ages, civilizations, and dimensions forgotten by modern thought? For the ancient souls, Cayce foresaw the journey of becoming is not about becoming something new. It is the sacred unraveling of everything false, until only truth remains. This is not a path for the faint-hearted, because becoming who you are means remembering, and remembering means pain. It means watching your carefully constructed identities dissolve. It means feeling the ache of lifetimes lost wisdom repressed and missions delayed. It means confronting the unbearable silence of not being seen for who you are, because the world only knows how to validate who you appear to be. In Jungian psychology, this moment is known as the encounter with the shadow. It's the point at which the unconscious begins to rise not to torment, but to integrate, to reclaim the pieces of soul we've scattered through time, shame, and suppression. And for those returning souls, the ones Cayce said would walk among you, appearing ordinary, yet carrying extraordinary gifts, the shadow takes on a different form. It is not merely personal, it is ancestral, archetypal, cosmic. It is the memory of Atlantis as it sank, the grief of watching Lemurian temples burn in silence, the shame of having once misused power, and now returning to make it right, the pain of watching truths be twisted, light-distorted wisdom buried again and again. You are not just healing your wounds. You are reweaving the torn threads of human evolution. This is why your soul signed the contract. This is why you agreed to return, not to ascend away from the earth, but to bring heaven into it. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the unthinkable and still spoke of meaning, once wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." For returning souls, the why is ancient, encoded, sacred. But the how, that's where the struggle begins. How do you hold cosmic memory in a culture that fears stillness? How do you live with multidimensional perception in a world that values only the visible? How do you carry soul purpose in a system that demands productivity over presence? The answer is not escape, it is embodiment. The soul does not want to bypass the human, it wants to inhabit it. This is the central paradox, the mystery Cayce hinted at, but never fully revealed. The more ancient the soul, the more essential the incarnation. You did not return to float above suffering. You returned to walk through it with eyes open, to remind those drowning in forgetfulness that there is something more, that there has always been something more, and you are it. Alan Watts once mused, "You are the universe experiencing itself." But he also warned that awakening to this truth without grounding can lead to despair, that knowing you are divine without knowing how to live that divinity in a chaotic world can fracture the psyche. This is where so many of the returning souls get lost, because the visions come early, the knowing arrives before the map, and without a framework to hold it. Psychology labels it dysfunction, culture calls it delusion, and families fear what they cannot explain. This is the dark night of the old soul. The descent not into hell, but into density. And it's here in this descent that the choice emerges. Not the choice to awaken that was made long ago, but the choice to stay awake, even when it would be easier to sleep. To remember even when the remembering burns. To walk as mystery in a world that demands definition. This is the path of what the ancient Greeks called the anamnesis, the soul's remembering. Plato believed that all learning was remembering, that the truth already lives within us dormant waiting. What we call revelation is simply the removal of amnesia. And what Cayce's 1895 prophecy described long before modern psychology or quantum science was exactly this, a species on the cusp of its great remembering. The return of the anamnetic ones, those who do not need to be taught, only reminded. But why now? Because the earth itself is shifting, not just environmentally, but energetically. The veil between dimensions, between timelines, between frequencies is thinning. What once took lifetimes to awaken now happens in weeks, days, moments. And the returning ones, they are not here to lead revolutions. They are here to stabilize vibration, to hold frequency, to anchor memory. Their mere presence shifts the resonance of a room, not because they are better, but because they remember what others forgot. This is not ego, this is frequency. And frequency, when held with humility, becomes invitation. Invitation to realign, to remember in both senses of the word, to rejoin the body of truth we were never supposed to leave. So if you felt like your life is more spiral than straight line, that's because it is. If you felt like your suffering has archetypal roots, that's because it does. You are not navigating mental illness. You are navigating mythic illness, the disorientation of a soul too old for its context. And your cure is not found in silencing the voice, but in honoring it. In trusting that the madness is not madness, but message. That the ache is not error, but echo. Jung said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. But he also said this, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The returning ones are proof. They come in waves, they come in whispers, They come in breakdowns and breakthroughs. And they come as you, not to escape the world, but to remember it into something new. If any of this resonated not just in your mind, but in your marrow, this message was not information. It was initiation. We explore soul truths others fear to say out loud. If you're ready to remember, click subscribe. Your path is just beginning. Edgar Cayce once said, "Dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions." But what if you are the dream? What if the ache in your chest, the timing of your birth, the strange magnetism you've always felt toward the stars, is not coincidence? What if you are the prophecy? Cayce's 1895 vision didn't describe saviors. It described rememberers, souls seeded into time, planted like quiet prayers, hidden in plain sight until the veils began to lift. And the veils are lifting now. Not just globally, politically, environmentally, spiritually, but personally. You feel it. The cracks in your old life no longer whisper. They thunder. The things you once tolerated now feel unbearable. The people you once performed for can no longer hear you. The masks that protected you now suffocate. This is not breakdown. This is the soul surfacing. And that ache you've been carrying, the inexplicable grief, the longing, the pressure building behind your ribs, is the sacred tension of a soul trying to awaken inside a system designed to keep you asleep. But it cannot hold you anymore, because something ancient is stirring. It is your memory, your vow, the contract you signed in silence long before you had a name. You promised to return not as a hero but as a harmonizer, not to rise above but to root deeper, to bring the unseen back into the scene, to carry the frequencies of love, truth, and clarity into a world starved for meaning. And now the world needs you to remember, but not with your mind, with your marrow. Because remembering isn't thinking, it's re-becoming. And when you do, when you surrender to the remembering, everything shifts. Time softens. You begin to walk differently, not faster, but truer. You begin to speak less, but say more. You begin to notice the signs, the patterns, the resonance in a stranger's eyes. Not because you're psychic, but because you're finally tuned to the soul frequency that has been waiting to sing through you. This is the point of Cayce's prophecy, not prediction, but activation. You were never meant to just hear it. You were meant to awaken through it. So ask yourself now, what if this strange lifetime, this specific pain, this sense of being out of place, is not evidence of misfortune? What if it's evidence of mission? You're not here to escape. You're here to embody. To become the walking answer to the question humanity has been too afraid to ask, is there more? And when enough of us remember, we don't just heal ourselves, we shift the collective field. We re-anchor Earth in her original blueprint. We fulfill the ancient promise. The prophecy is no longer hidden. You are holding it now, living it, breathing it. And if your soul whispered yes at any point in this message, you are part of it. This isn't just a channel. It's a return. Welcome back to what you always knew. What if you're not broken? What if you're simply remembering your soul contract? Perhaps you are not lost. You're simply tracing the path of a promise your heart never forgot.